It's Wednesday, the day before Tennessee takes to the podium for SEC Media Day, so we've got plenty of preview action for you. 3 interviews, and somebody is predicting Kentucky to win the East this year. We'll tell you who that is coming up later in the show. All that and more here on Wednesday, Locked On Vols.
You are Locked On Vols, your daily podcast on the Tennessee Volunteers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's good, everybody? Welcome into this edition of Locked On Vols, live from SEC Football Media Days. We are recording this here from Radio Row. I'm your host, Eric Kane. As always, find it on YouTube. Make it your first listen. Throw me a little thumbs up, guy. Throw me a positive review, 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, all that and more, guys. Really, really do appreciate that. But in for a fun show today, we're going to have Chuck Oliver, the king of college football, runs a syndicated show all across the Southeast. And, of course, he is a mainstay. Afternoon Drive on 680 The Fan in Atlanta. Chuck and Chernoff, awesome guy. He's coming on to talk a little Tennessee football in segment 1. Roger Hoover of the Crimson Tide Sports Network and a former Vol Network alum and Tennessee athletics alum as well is coming up in segment 2. And then lastly, we're going to have Lance Dawe on, our Locked On Kentucky host, who does an awesome job. We're going to have a little fun here. He's down here at SEC Media Days, and he's got a pretty bold take, so you're going to want to hang out here and check that out from him as well. So having a whole lot of fun down here at SEC Media Days. Remember that Tennessee takes to the podium on Thursday. Cedric Tillman. You will have Hendon Hooker, Trayvon Flowers coming up. Hey, today it was Alabama Day, or rather, I guess it was yesterday was Alabama Day. You had Nick Saban. You had Clark Lee of Vanderbilt. You had Mike Leach of Mississippi State and Shane Beamer of South Carolina. A lot of good stuff, and you should check out all of our coverage on the Locked On Podcast Network of SEC Media Days. But without further ado, let's get into it. Chuck Oliver, the king of college football. Here's what he had to say when I sit down chat with Chuck about the Tennessee Volunteers. Chuck Oliver Show, 680 The Fan in Atlanta. Chuck, good to see you again, my man, down here at SEC Media Days. 1 day in the books. We're starting here day 2. Big day, Nick Saban, Alabama, and a couple other teams are going to be here. What are you looking for?
Yeah, and in Hoover, it's Circus Day. And in Atlanta, still going to be a little bit of it. I'll talk about Alabama, but my observation, because, I'm from Atlanta, and everybody loves a home game, but I've said since the 2018 event was here that it's almost like they gave us too nice a space. Like, we had our engineer yesterday, one of the folks came up to him and says, "Oh, you can't eat French fries here." And I was like, you don't need to send SEC media to a place that's too nice to eat French fries, I think that it needs to be in Hoover, more of an accessible area, because I miss the scene when Coach Saban comes down the escalator or through the magic door behind us, the secret passageway, and he just appears out of nowhere. I miss the vibe, the energy, because it kind of helps you do your job almost, It's like you play golf at the Masters or you play Tuesday at the local Muni. It's a big difference. But with Nick Saban today, what I'm looking for is, not saying looking forward to it, but I want to see if he has another misstep, I don't want to say bad moment, but he looks confused. He looks unsure right now. What's going on with the recruiting? What's up with name, image, likeness? The Jimbo thing. Has Kirby got me in the corner? There's a lot of Nick Saban that I'm looking at right now that is not normal. I'm always used to him having a challenge, and then he comes up with something like where he ditched all the safeties and went all corners in the secondary, He usually is so on top of that, and there are some changes in college football that seem to have him on his heels a little bit. And that's interesting to me because he never misspeaks, never has a bad moment with his, and he's had some of those lately.
Yeah, it's interesting because, just like yesterday, you'll have Lane Kiffin that'll say whatever he wants to. Mark Stoops has been very adamant, speaking out against it, at least at Kentucky. Nick Saban is not a fan of it, obviously, but I feel like he does not want to have a misstep. I feel like a lot of things he says today might be rehearsed. But Nick Saban, when he speaks, people listen. He's talked about like what's good for the game so many different times. I just think that it was a situation a couple weeks ago or a couple months ago where I think it just got away from him. So I'm intrigued to see kind of how he responds there. Looking ahead to the rest of the week, Tennessee in particular is coming up on Thursday. Josh Heupel, Hendon Hooker, Cedric Tillman, Trey Flowers. Are you looking to learn anything in particular about the Volunteers coming up on Thursday?
Really, I just need more insight into what can happen on defense. I don't think that they're at a spot where I can say, all right, plug this guy in. I know they're going to have pass rush, or I know the run defense is going to be good. They'll be good on the back end, and so maybe they'll play some blitz games up front. I don't know what corner they fight out of. I don't really know what the angle is. At least last year, and you'll know the numbers. Did they have 2 or 3 or 4 really old men on the defensive line?
And Matthew Butler, who was a six-year, I believe.
Guy.
Yeah, Jaquan Blakely was a 6-year guy.
And so they had some old men up there. I was like, all right, that's an angle. And what were they? They were kind of tough up front. I don't know what that angle is this year. And there has been so much talent that has come through there. And I'm used to seeing a guy like Henry To'oTo'o, who leads the team in tackles there and then goes somewhere else, leads the team in tackles there. And I don't know that that's really the level of talent that's there right now. In fact, it's not. But you've got some tough guys and some guys. I'll put it this way: Tennessee's got some guys that earn their scholarship every Saturday. A lot of tough guys and a lot of guys who are at least trying to make that sort of impression.
You told me last year when we were kind of going over expectations for Tennessee, and I said, well, if Tennessee wants to get to 7 wins or 8 wins, and you told me, hey, you don't need to be thinking of that mindset because that's where Tennessee's been for so long. So I'll ask you this: what should be the realistic expectations, the goals? What do you need to see in year 2 from Josh Heupel and this team?
Again, improvement on defense, but then also the ability to, I don't want to say be seamless on offense, but is it an accessible offense for more than just special players? Hendon Hooker's a special player. I think maybe Velus Jones was a special player. I don't know about that. Their ability is something, you and I have chatted about, their ability to replace good players with the next guy, whoever it is, 3-star, 4-star, whoever, Brew McCoy. I'm looking, what is that impact? That's really the to be seamless year to year, and he's only had one, we've only had one season of him on Rocky Top, and so as he continues to build that resume, I want to see if he really is a successful offense at this level that you can, like Mike Leach, that's going to work at the Power 5 level. I want to see what Josh Heupel does when he has to replace some of that special talent.
Not that I'm asking you to give out your power rankings right now, but where do you have Hendon Hooker in terms of, you've seen it for 1 year at Tennessee, this will now be his 5th year with this offense. Kind of where do you stack Hendon Hooker up amongst his peers, quarterbacks around the SEC?
Oh, and I would even go bigger than that. He may be a top 3, top 5 quarterback nationally. And it's everything from actual on-field effect to if you play like the daily, FanDuel or Draft King or whatever. He's as productive as any quarterback. What was it, 35-3 last year? The touchdowns and the picks?
Total 36-3. He had 31 passing and then 5 more rushing.
That's stupid. That is insane for a quarterback who's like, oh yeah, hey, my name is Hendon. What's your name? All right, let's go play some offense. That was the result. So he could be even better this year. Problem is Bryce Young sucks all the air out of the room. And if it's not him, it's KJ Jefferson. Like Spence Rattler. Have you heard 3 words about Spence Rattler this offseason? Because I really haven't, other than, attitude problem at OU. I'm like, he was the number 1 quarterback coming out of high school in America in 2019. That kid does not go to South Carolina. He's there now. So, and Will Levis and Anthony Richardson, who are both apparently top 10 picks. They're in the division, and I like Hendon Hooker better.
What do you think about Will Levis? Because, again, you mentioned
I saw a bunch of turnovers last year is what I saw. Now, I saw an athletic guy, good size. Boy, he looks Sunday, doesn't he? He looks like he's supposed to be there. I'm telling you, when it comes to quarterbacks, I'm like, it's like a doctor. First rule, do no harm. I cannot have you turn the ball over. If you turn the ball over, you can't play. And there were too many Saturdays where 1 turnover became 2 or 3. And I just fix that and let's talk. That's it. Anthony Richardson, did he start 4 games?
I want to say 3 or 4, yeah.
Okay, I can't tell you anything about him. And I mean, go Google first round 2023. You've done it, I'm sure. 6th overall, 9th overall, 15th overall. I'm like, what are y'all looking at?
Last thing here, kind of looking ahead, we're gonna fill out our ballots here later on in the week. But do you see this kind of as a Georgia still in the East? I don't think Tennessee's ready to go there. I don't think Kentucky is going to knock them off. I don't think Florida this year is going to do anything against Georgia. And then do you see Alabama on the other side? Do you see anybody challenging? Maybe an A&M, maybe a surprise team, maybe LSU jumping up there, hitting some of those guys on any given Saturday. Do you see it as a Alabama-Georgia type situation again?
Well, that's what I'm writing now. In fact, about a month ago, I was like, preseason battle, Alabama. I've already got at least the top of it done. Yeah. Does it mean we're going to be right? I don't know. And I know there are a lot of folks in the room who, sometimes it's checkers. Yeah. All right? Some people are going to turn this into chess and try to figure out, all right, where's the angle? No, the angle's Georgia and Alabama. Now, here's the truth. Like 2013, I think Missouri was 50-1 to win the SEC preseason. I think Auburn was 75-1 to win the SEC. Yeah. It's sports. It happens. I also gave you an example from about 10 years ago. So you're voting Alabama and Georgia, aren't you?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so that's what I'm going with the chalk there, and that's what makes sense, but it doesn't mean we're going to be right.
Chuck, where can we listen to you? Where can we find all of your work? I know you're on pretty much 6-7 hours a day.
Yeah, I'm on 2 hours, the syndicated gig going throughout the Southeast. I mean, we are from Florida to Kentucky to Louisiana, just a giant circle there. Chuck Oliver Show, you can get me King CFB on Twitter, and that'll link you through to everywhere on the radio and online that you can get us.
Great stuff there from Chuck Oliver. Again, the king of college football, catching up with us here on Locked On Vols. Coming up next, Roger Hoover of the Crimson Tide Sports Network. It was Alabama Day earlier on Tuesday. What does he have to say about the Crimson Tide? And a little bit of Tennessee preview for that third Saturday in October coming up next here on Locked On Vols. But first, let me remind you about Built Bar. From the people who invented healthy and tasty comes the latest gift to your taste buds. You probably already tried the amazing Coconut Brownie Chunk Built Bar, but guess what? Your friends at Built are giving you Coconut Brownie Chunk. The puffs are such a treat, all right? That's right, the Coconut Brownie Chunk Built Bar, the flavor you love, in a delicious, chewy marshmallow covered in 100% real chocolate. It's like a fluffy cloud of coconut, chocolatey goodness, if you will, right? But it doesn't stop there. Stop drooling and listen up. They're so good for you. Low in calorie, low in sugar, high in protein, all delicious. The Coconut Brownie Chunk Puffs are only here for a limited time, so you need to go to Built.com right now and make sure you don't miss out. They are going fast because, hey, they are so amazing. But not just that flavor, whatever flavor you want. If you think it tastes good, chances are Built's already done it. You can check them all out at Built.com. But again, only for a limited time, so go and visit Built.com right now. While you're there, lock 15 for 15% off your next order. That is Built.com, lock 15 for 15% off. That's all at Built.com. All right, guys, went Locked On Vols here on this Wednesday edition from Radio Row. This is your host, Eric Kane, @_Kane on Twitter. And, of course, it is at Locked On Vols. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. And we're going to have tons and tons of guests and previews on for a Thursday right before Tennessee gets set to take the podium, recapping for a Friday. We're halfway through the week, but there's a lot going on. All right, good buddy of mine, Roger Hoover, Crimson Tide Sports Network, formerly of the University of Tennessee Network. He stopped by for Alabama Day on Tuesday, talked to him a little bit about the Crimson Tide and also what he thinks about Tennessee football here in 2022. Here is my conversation with Roger Hoover. Obviously came up short last year for Alabama, but every single year they are considered heavy favorites before it's all said and done.
Yeah, you look back, I believe it's been almost 7 years they've been favored to win the SEC here at SEC Media Days when those votes start to roll in. It's amazing how this program just continues to raise the standard for not just what Crimson Tide fans want. They want a national championship every year, but now all the other fan bases in the SEC are trying to match that. And we saw a program that had been close in Georgia finally break through last year in Indianapolis, and a really tough second half for the Crimson Tide. So it is back to work. A lot of people like to say, oh, such a down year for Alabama. It really wasn't. Because if you look, if they don't have that great comeback in the Iron Bowl against Auburn, they're not going to be, even with a win against Georgia, they're probably still not going to be in the college football playoffs. So I think this is a really hungry group. It's a group that has a lot of leadership that developed as last season went along and was finally there at the end of the year. But now it's going to be coming in from day one. No longer are they kind of looking over their shoulders saying, okay, where's Mac Jones? Where's Devontae Smith, Landon Dickerson? Now you know who's back. You know it's Bryce Young. You know it's Will Anderson Jr. And then the Tennessee transfer, Henry To'oTo'o, as one of the most beloved players in that locker room. So I think that those things are in place now, plus some really exciting additions in the transfer portal. It makes for the start of a really fun year.
I mean, I know the jokes kind of write themselves and everybody likes to crack on Alabama and everything, but I mean, no joke. I mean, this is arguably, this isn't fact, but who I think the two best college football players are in the country. Bryce Young and Will Anderson Jr. One on one side of the ball, one on the other. Just the luxury that you have in order to bring in that type of talent, develop that type of talent, and then get that type of play out a couple years later. It's we've seen this before at Alabama.
We have seen this before, and I just love the fact that these guys are some of the hardest workers on the team, so that really translates to everybody else when they see the meticulous preparation that Bryce is doing, stuff that he was able to learn from Mac Jones, and then on down the line, even from Tua passed on to Mac. Now we've seen Mac pass it on to Bryce. Just the work he does in the film room really reminds me of all the stories I heard about Peyton Manning when he was at Tennessee, and I was just talking with Bryce a little bit ago. He loved getting to go to the Manning Passing Academy, and now he text Peyton, every now and then. Peyton will see a play and be like, watch the footwork of this quarterback doing this, and how he can help improve his own game. So that's been really good. And then Will Anderson Jr. is the most disruptive player in college football. So should
have been in New York last year.
I agree. I totally agree. I think you're going to see a lot of people support him in that quest this season, and the challenge for him is going to be teams are going to game plan against him like crazy, which happened a lot last year, and he still broke through. Can he keep breaking through like he did last year? I think that's going to be really the key question for him. But he'll get his sacks, he'll get his disruptions, and forcing fumbles, and maybe some interceptions, and who knows, maybe more highlight level plays that will go endlessly on SportsCenter and on social media will help propel him to New York. But he certainly, day in, day out, provides Alabama with what they need from both a deep offensive linebacker situation and the leadership.
Roger Hoover, you cover the Alabama Crimson Tide right now, but of course you are a graduate from the University of Tennessee. You are a product of the Ball Network. You're number 2 for Josh Heupel. You had an offense that kind of came in and broke a ton of records. You got a quarterback coming back. Got a couple players on defense that you like. Kind of what's your outlook on Tennessee and Josh Heupel here in year 2?
I'm really excited to see the progress they make, because last year the progress they had even right before the season began and what they showed in games early last year stood out to me, because I was probably like a lot of people who looked at the roster and said, okay, how many wins can this team really get? Can they really score points? And they did in every game, and they gave Alabama one of the toughest challenges that Alabama received last year in a game that Alabama won. I mean, that was a really tight game. Tennessee had a lead briefly in the second half. So I think Alabama fans are starting to pay attention a little bit more to what's going on in Knoxville, especially given the fact that the week before in Tuscaloosa, you'll have Alabama hosting Texas A&M. The storylines write themselves for that ball game. And if that's a tight, emotional ball game, then all of a sudden the next week you get to go to Rocky Top and in front of Neyland Stadium with the Vols signs back on the south end zone. It's going to be
2 of them.
I love it. It's going to be pretty exciting. So I definitely think this is a program that's making a lot of progress. Hendon Hooker is really one of the better quarterbacks in the SEC. And I can't wait to see what happens for him this season with another offseason to work with Coach Heupel, and especially an offseason where he knows he's the guy. He knows he's the person that'll be getting the starting reps and has to carry this football team. So, yeah, it's been nothing but exciting to keep up with the alma mater, and I can't wait to get back to Knoxville for that Alabama-Tennessee game, because I think that feeling of the third Saturday in October is starting to come back again.
Yeah, more on Hendon Hooker. There's not many quarterbacks that are represented here at SEC Media Days. Mike Wright was here earlier today. You'll have a couple more, but Hendon Hooker, Bryce Young obviously was here. Hendon Hooker will be here on Thursday. He is the guy. This is his team. I, like you, and I'm sure many, many others, Hendon Hooker's a top 4 quarterback in the conference. It just kind of, I have him right there at number 2. I know some might have him at 4, some might have him at 5, but he is a top 4 to 5 quarterback in this league. Kind of what do you like about his game, and where do you think he kind of stacks up behind Young as some of the conference's best at the quarterback position?
Well, I like that he's really smart, number 1. He makes good decisions. He doesn't put you in a bad spot, doesn't force the football, and is really nimble with his feet. The fact that he can scramble out of trouble and kind of do what Bryce is able to do a lot. Bryce is able to move the pocket as effortlessly as any quarterback I've seen. Hendon is able to do that a lot as well, and if he can get some really good protection, I think if he stays in the pocket a little bit more, he's only going to be more accurate. He's only going to be more deadly throwing the ball downfield. So all those things are working in his favor. Some good receivers coming back. I'm like you. I think he's one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC, specifically if you look at the SEC East. Yes, Stetson Bennett does have a national championship, and he quieted a lot of critics last year, including me. Less than 3 hours before the game. That's the question I was asking all of our analysts on the Crimson Tide Sports Center.
I don't know how quiet I've been since then, but he certainly proved me wrong, I guess.
Yeah, because I was asking the question, well, can Stetson Bennett win a game like this? Because we had seen him lose in Tuscaloosa. We saw him lost in Atlanta. He answered the bell in the second half. So I think that's going to be fascinating, too, what Tennessee-Georgia looks like moving forward.
The more I think about it, I think that the last thing here, the quarterbacks in this conference, it's pretty. There were a lot of unknowns at point in times over the last couple of years than guys that we got to know. You return the Heisman Trophy winner. You return a guy like Hendon Hooker. Will Rogers is coming back. Will Levis, who's getting praise from every which direction. Spencer Rattler's coming into the conference. You've got a guy, Anthony Richardson, that I think the sky's the limit. KJ Jefferson, hadn't even mentioned him. I mean, there's a lot of good quality guys at this position, and I think you're starting to see how the position is evolving as well. Guys who can do a little bit of everything. Bigger, athletic guys that can run, can break tackles, can also throw. Hendon Hooker, can do all those things, but I wouldn't characterize him as a bigger guy. But I'm impressed with the quarterback position kind of in this conference right now.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned KJ Jefferson because that was a guy who came into Tuscaloosa and had that Arkansas team play really well and gave Alabama's very good defense a lot of fits last year with what he was able to do. So I think you're exactly right. The quarterback depth is really as strong as we've seen, and probably Spencer Rattler at South Carolina is the most fascinating one because their quarterback play last year was not up to par with the rest of the SEC, even in some games they played well. So now how does that change the dynamic? Could we see Carolina be a little bit more competitive against Georgia or Kentucky or Tennessee? Because I think those are still those key three teams in the East, and I'd almost slide Tennessee ahead of Kentucky at number 2 behind Georgia in the East. Obviously, it'll get determined on the field, but I'm really fascinated to see now maybe that South Carolina game is not quite the pushover it has been in the last few years.
Do you? I lied. I got one more. Do you see Tennessee being the number 2 team in the East whenever the media gets done voting later this week?
I do. I think a lot of people realize the progress that was made under Josh Heupel, and for reasons we've stated earlier, now Heupel's had an entire offseason to work with Hendon Hooker and these receivers and running backs and make sure everybody's on the same page. And I think the schedule is kind of favorable for Tennessee. You're catching LSU at a really good time, and if this program is able to go to Pittsburgh and win in the Johnny Majors Classic, they're going to come back to Knoxville with a ton of momentum. So, again, from afar, everybody, even a lot of Alabama fans, quite frankly, are rooting for Tennessee to get off to a good start, and maybe it'll be a really special atmosphere inside Neyland Stadium, maybe 2 undefeated teams when those teams meet in mid-October.
That would be wild for the third Saturday in October. Roger Hoover, where can we see you on TV next? I know it'll get a little slower, but you'll have some soccer, a little volleyball as well. You do a whole lot of baseball, softball, and a whole lot of basketball as well. When can we see you next time on the SEC Network?
I haven't received my schedule yet for soccer and volleyball, both at Tennessee and Alabama for SEC Network Plus, but we'll have those games coming up starting in August, and then obviously basketball. I still do a little bit of a mixture of Tennessee-Alabama work for basketball season, both men's and women's, so look forward to getting back to Knoxville a little bit and listening to my favorite radio station, WNML, when I'm back in town. So I won't tell you my favorite show, but
yeah, I was going to say, I already know the answer to that. All right, man, Roger, appreciate it, man. Go K-Mets.
Absolutely. Go K-Mets. Talons up. Thank you, Eric.
Big thanks to Roger Hoover for stopping by the show. And let me tell you, you need to hang on right now because our guy Lance Dawe from Locked On Kentucky, he is joining the show. He has a take that you're going to want to hear. It's gonna make you mad. I'm just going to let you know, but you've got to hear it. That's coming up next here with a little crossover edition. Lance Dawe of Locked On Kentucky coming up next. All right, we got a treat for you guys here on Locked On Vols, concluding a Wednesday show. I'm your host, Eric Kane. This guy right here, I need to lower the third here. I said I wasn't going to put that up there, but you know me, it's out of habit. I'm Eric Kane. He's Lance Dawe. He's our Locked On Kentucky host. Does a really, really nice job. Honestly, I know you guys are not Kentucky fans, but if you ever want a really nice breakdown leading into a critical Tennessee-Kentucky football game, a Tennessee-Kentucky basketball game, you know, I rely on stats, but this guy goes, you know, within the numbers here. So he does a really, really good job and a great addition to the network. Lance, happy SEC Media Days, and college football is vastly approaching.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I really am looking forward to the beginning of the season, and I'm really looking forward to watching how the SEC East shakes out this season. It feels like outside of maybe Auburn and Vanderbilt, that every single program in the Southeastern Conference is on the rise in some shape or form, whether that be off the field. Obviously, Shane Beamer just took the podium here today, talking about all the different facilities they've got. They've got some momentum in other places. Tennessee right now with Josh Heupel, obviously doing really, really good things with the Vols during his early years with Tennessee. Kentucky, who we're going to talk about here for a little bit. Really excited about what the Wildcats are doing. Georgia, obviously, is Georgia. Missouri's doing good things with Eli Drinkwitz, one of the best recruiting classes in the country coming in. And then you look to the West. I mean, everybody is loaded to some extent. So, yeah, the conference is doing really, really well. I'm really excited to see this upcoming season because if Alabama is anything like they were last year, they could potentially pick up another loss. They could potentially pick up 2. I think that offensive line is really interesting. But point being, we've been asking for parity in the conference for a while now, right? And we've been asking for some new faces to kind of appear. I don't know if it's going to happen this season, but I think we're going to see glimpses of it. And I really do think we're going to start to see some new teams kind of rise to the top of the Southeastern Conference.
Yeah, I know, and especially if you look at the SEC East, I mean, you've got Georgia, who's a reigning national champion. They're still going to be good this year, in my opinion. But, I mean, they can only come down, right? I mean, they're not Alabama, at least in my opinion. I don't think that they're going to repeat. They lost too much on defense. But they can only come down, right? I see Tennessee, and we'll see what year 2 has in store for Josh Heupel. There are some things that he needs to answer, defense in particular and stuff like that. Was it too much of a gimmicky offense? Well, can you pick up right where you left off, all that? But year 2 is big for him, but it's kind of going up right there. Florida's going to go up with a good coach. I think Kentucky is a solid football team. I am a huge Mark Stoops guy. I'm a huge Kentucky apologist on this podcast for Mark Stoops. And then South Carolina, it's hard to say anything bad about him right now. I mean,
Yeah.
I do like Shane Beamer. I think that he very much is a coach's son. He gets it. He knows what to say. He has the energy. But he kind of strikes me as a used car salesman a little bit. But
Okay.
I think he's been really good for that program. And they played so hard last year. So I get what you're saying. Let me just throw this out to you right now. And this is not we're not doing a bit here. This is just an off, I call this in radio, an off-air conversation we're bringing on air, right? I know this is a podcast. But the West, you believe Alabama's going to win the West, I would assume.
I do believe Alabama is going to win the West this year.
And do you believe Georgia's going to win the East?
I do not.
Okay.
I do not believe the Bulldogs are going to win the East.
Okay, so I'm not saying that another team could win the East. I'm saying, like, do you believe you straight up believe Georgia's not going to win the East?
If it's not Georgia, it is one other team in particular, in my opinion. And I definitely think, for the record, for those Vols fans out there, I think that Tennessee has a very legitimate shot.
Yeah.
So, all due respect, I think it's one of two teams, and I think Tennessee is a very, very, very close third this year.
Go easy on them in the comments section. I've already told them that you guys are going to jump in there. You're going to send me DMs.
They're going to come to my show, too.
Yeah, Locked On Kentucky. Let them know you watched him on Locked On Vols. He's a good dude. I think this is a fun exercise because, again, I think Kentucky is a good team. Kentucky runs how many offensive linemen? Starters, 3 of 5, I believe.
I believe it's 3 of 5, and then they've got a 5-star kid potentially starting at left tackle. They brought in a couple of transfers, one of them from Auburn that was a starter there from quite some time. I mean, they've got some good players in the trenches.
They're bringing back a whole lot on the front seven. They've got a great linebacker and Squires, whatever his name is.
DeAndre Square.
Yeah, really good linebacker. They are a physical football team up front. That's just Mark Stoops. They're bringing back the leading rusher in the SEC and Chris Rodriguez, C-Rod or whatever. You're bringing back Levis, who I think has got all the intangibles to be a good quarterback. He needs to be more consistent and all that. But really, what makes you believe that if it's not Georgia, it could be Kentucky?
I think when you look at the Bulldogs this year, I think obviously that they're phenomenally coached. I think that they have really, really, really good talent. Like they could go and win another title this year. I'm not saying that Georgia's a bad football team. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
One of the most important things, I think, whenever you are establishing a program is finding your identity and sticking with it, right? And I think a lot of it has to do with experience, and I think a lot of it has to do with the personnel that you have. They lost 15 guys to the NFL draft, 15 guys. And the question in my mind is, I know that they have talent. I know that they've got a good coaching staff. Can they do what Alabama has done year after year after year and reload? Now, they've got these new faces. They've got guys they've been talking about that they're really excited about to see them actually take the field, specifically on the defensive side of the ball. My hang up is, are those players going to step up and produce the way that team did last year? And there could be a potential opportunity for that to happen, but I think they're also running into a division in year two with, Josh Heupel, Shane Beamer. You got a really experienced guy in Mark Stoops. Going to have some more difficult tests this season within their own division. And I think that they will slip up. That's just my opinion. I think that their identity is going to be, we are a very physical defensive football team that is going to impose our will on everyone. And I think their offense is going to be a little bit better than it was last year. But if they find themselves in a position, let's say second to last game of the year in Lexington on the road, and Kentucky strikes first, and Kentucky's got a good defense. If Kentucky's able to, say, grow a 10-point lead at some point in that game, do they have the ability to make a comeback? Does that offense have the ability to make a comeback?
See, we always said that about Kentucky as well until it got Will Levis, because now you can, because you got a quarterback that can the forward pass. And Terry Wilson couldn't.
This is not a knock on Stetson Bennett, right?
Yeah.
Like, he is a very capable. We saw that in the national title game. Very capable quarterback. So you look at Georgia's program, you start to wonder about the consequences of success. You start to see, okay, teams are going to be really looking to knock them off the stand this season. Like I said earlier, much more difficult competition. I think this year, and you look at Kentucky specifically. If we're going to shift to the Wildcats now, the question with Mark Stoops that I've had this offseason is not everyone. I've seen it thrown out there that Kentucky is an overachieving program. They've got a really good coaching staff that takes talent, and they have overachieved in the East. They've won when they shouldn't have won 8, 9, 10 games. Have you heard that?
See, I've heard a little bit of that. I wholeheartedly don't believe that. I just think that the MO is you're going to ugly up games. You're going to out physical the other team. You're going to run the football. And now, again, this is the difference, because that was Kentucky's MO with Terry Wilson, but now you have a quarterback that can actually do some things,
right?
And so I think that makes Kentucky even more dangerous. So I have heard that a little bit. I completely disagree, because I just think this has been years, 4, 5, 6 years in the making.
So that was my point. That's my question to Kentucky fans and to national media who continue to say, oh, well, Kentucky's one of the most overrated programs in the country this year. When is it going to change from overachieving to that just being what is expected of this program? Because they've gotten to a level of consistency now where you tend to expect, okay, they're bringing in top 20 recruiting classes. They're bringing in these skill position players that are really talented. One of the most important things when you want to build the foundation of a team, though, is getting things done in the trenches. Really good offensive line play for several years now for Kentucky.
I just think the difference is, or not the difference, I think like Tennessee with having to get over the hump of like Florida, Florida for Tennessee is Tennessee for Kentucky. You just got to get over it, right? I mean, you've got to get over it. Like, I know Kentucky beat Tennessee, smacked them a couple of years ago. It was 2020. Yeah, that disastrous season. Tennessee last beat Florida like in 2016. But historically, like those two programs just kind of own the other, which I think Tennessee has room to grow and everything, but you've got to get past Florida. I think Kentucky has as well, but you got to get past Tennessee. So it's interesting to think about. My question for you is, if it's not Georgia, your pick would be Kentucky. If it's not Georgia, why wouldn't it be Tennessee?
I think that, like I mentioned earlier, Mark Stoops, I think where he's gotten Kentucky, I think that the model of consistency that he has with this program, it may be one of the most consistent programs in the entire country. I mean, you think of Kentucky, you think of Iowa in terms of just they're never going to stoop to the level. And we end the show. Roll credit.
It's been fun.
But yeah, I think that you look at the model of consistency that they've had, and now I think you look at two things, like you've mentioned several times. Will Levis, you've got a quarterback. I said heading into last season, what Kentucky needs to get over the hump is they need to find somebody that's not just a game manager at quarterback. They need a game changer. They need somebody that can have legitimate arm talent and throw the ball downfield and make the offense somewhat explosive. I hope with this young core of receivers that they've gotten, we've heard a lot of really good things about a couple of them, that Kentucky's going to continue to be able to do that. Tavion Robinson, will he be able to produce to the level of Wan'Dale Robinson? Probably not, but I think he's going to be that targeted slot guy. I think they've got weapons on offense. The backfield is insane. So you've got Chris Rodriguez. They just got a former Tennessee player, D. Beckwith, I believe.
Yeah, what's the sorry to interrupt you here. What is the thought process with D. Beckwith? Is he coming in to be a running back, a 6'5", 240-pound running back?
They have him listed on the roster as a running back.
Okay.
I believe he is going to be a rotational piece in the backfield. The name of this other kid is currently slipping my mind. Had 1,100 yards at Sam Houston State last year, transferred into the Wildcats. He's a 6th-year senior. They've got some really interesting pieces in that backfield. So they've got a really good offensive line. They've got an above-average quarterback. They've got exciting pieces at receiver. They've got a really, really good backfield. And then you mentioned it, the front seven. They've got some really, really solid players. They brought in a couple of players. Darian Henry-Young, I believe, is a transfer from Ohio State, former 5-star kid. Really excited to see what he does on the D-line. DeAndre Square, Jacquez Jones. They've got phenomenal linebackers. They've got questions in the secondary.
As does Tennessee.
As does Tennessee. But I believe that I don't think it's going to be a huge issue. I don't think it's going to be the reason Kentucky loses football games. So when you're asking, what's the difference between Kentucky and Tennessee just running up and down the roster, I don't want to offend anybody. I think it's a more complete team, especially when you look at the starters and the people that are going to be making plays.
That's fair to say. I mean, Tennessee is still continuing its rebuild. I mean, Tennessee had no linebackers last year. Tennessee had very little depth on the offensive line, yet still, Glenn Ellerbe, one of the most impressive jobs last season. doing what he did. Very little depth in the secondary, obviously. That's why you had two safeties that didn't deserve to keep playing. So, I mean, that's a fair assessment to make, or assumption to make. Year number two, I mean, the roster still is not where it needs to be. So it'll be interesting. I think that Tennessee and Kentucky, obviously the last few meetings, really the last 2020, not much so because Kentucky drilled Tennessee, but they're typically pretty good football games coming down to the end.
Yep.
And I think that 2022 will be no different. So we can do this more, maybe before we leave, because I know they're going to rip you. They're going to want you to come back on. So maybe we can come back on and do this again.
Rebuttal.
Also, check out his Locked On Kentucky stuff. He does fantastic work. Obviously, this is going to be a whole lot of fun throughout football season. Again, awesome work there by Lance Dawe. Appreciate you for stopping by, man. And if anybody's bored, I know you're a Vol fan, but you got Locked On Kentucky. Also, give him a follow on Twitter. What is it? It's not Dawe Pound anymore. What is it?
Lance Dawe _. And I also want to throw out there just real quick.
Okay.
If you guys think that I hate Tennessee or just hate the program, I think Hendon Hooker, like you mentioned on yesterday's show, I think he could be one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC, and he could be vying for first-team All-SEC honors. I truly believe that. In this offense, I think he can put up the numbers to make it happen.
Friend of the show, Lance Dawe. Hey, that's going to do it again for this Wednesday edition. We've got a full slate coming up here on a Thursday. You got Tennessee Vols and SEC Media Day. We are going to get you set for all that and a whole lot more, plus tons of reaction. We're halfway through SEC Football Media Days down here in Atlanta, Georgia. We got 2 more days to go. We're going to bring it all to you right here on Locked On Vols. Big thanks to Chuck Oliver, Roger Hoover, and my buddy Lance Dawe for stopping by the show. And most of all, thank you for listening and supporting the show, making Locked On Vols your first listen and your first watch on YouTube. Let's do it again tomorrow, guys. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday, everybody.